Hi all, I'm Dr. Sujya, Assistant Professor in the Department of Computer Application at Dr. S.N.S. Rajalakshmi College of Arts and Science. Here in series 1 video, I'm going to discuss is about the application program interface, that is API. So application programming interface is a collection of communication protocol and subroutine used by various programs to communicate between a client and a server. And a program can make use of various API tools to make their programs easier and simpler. Also, an API facilitates programmers with an efficient way to develop their software programs. Thus, API means it when an API helps two programs or applications to communicate with each other by providing them with the necessary tools and function, and it also takes the request from the user and sends to the service provider, and then again sends the results generated by the service provider to the desired user. So on the technical manner, we see an end user sits with a browser is requesting for a service, which in turn takes the request by the API and transfers to the appropriate server backend, where the server responses with the request of the client and get back with the response. And now the mediator API takes the response and then passes to the requested end user. So in the real time example, if we see a customer makes an order in a hotel, and that will be taken by a waiter to the chef. Once the chefs makes the dish ordered by the client, make it ready, and then it it is taken by the waiter from the kitchen, and it has been deliver the order to the customer. Here, the waiter plays the major role between a customer and a chef. Likewise, a waiter plays a role of an API, where the customer is the one which requests for a service. The chef is the server who responds for the client. So this is how an API works. And how does an API work is being explained clearly in the previous diagram in the technical manner and in a real-time manner, where here the client initiates the request via an API URI, and then API makes a call to the servers after receiving the request. Then the server sets the response back to the API with the information. How is API different from a web application is a web application allows proper communications between the programmer, whereas in a networks-based resource response was completed by a single task is a web application. And difference between an API and web application is it allows two-way communication, and whereas web application are just a way to use for interacting through a web browser. And the type of API here we have are the web API, local API, program API. And here, web API is extensively used over web and can be easily accessed by the HTTP protocol. And the local API is to get the local middleware services like telephone app programming interface and .NET, and the common examples of local API. Program API is a remote program appear to be local by making use of RPC, that is a remote procedural call. And what is REST API is? REST stands for Representational State Transfer, which follows the constraints of REST architecture, allowing interactions with RESTful web services, and it is defined by a set of functions called get, put, post, delete that clients uses to access server data, and the functions used are retrieving a record, updating a record, creating a record, and deleting the record. And these are the main features of RESTless API, which is stateless. That is, the server does not save client data between the request. Here, the web API can be accessed by an HTTP protocol, and it can be built using Java, .NET, etc. And it is implemented to an extent of functionality of a browser, and it simplifies complex functions and provide easy syntax to complex code. And next is, and what is the difference between SOAP and a REST? SOAP is nothing but a simple object access protocol. REST is the representational state transfer. So what is the difference between these both are? SOAP is a protocol with specific requirements like XML messaging, where REST is offering a flexible implementation, and it is heavier for the needs, and it requires more bandwidth, where REST requires lightweight and need less bandwidth, and it defines its own security, whereas REST inherits security from underlying transport. and it prevents XML based data formats only, whereas REST permits different data formats such as plain text, HTML, XML, and JSON. And SOAP call cannot be cached, and REST calls can be cached. So this is the difference between a SOAP and a REST. And what is API integration? If we see, it is a connections between two or more applications via API, letting to exchange data, and it is a medium through which you can share data and communicate with each other by involving API to allow web tools to communicate. And what is API testing? Likewise, software testing, API testing also undergoes various types of settings such as unit test, integration test, security test, performance test, functional test, and before exchanging data across applications. And next is advantages of API. It's of good of efficiency and flexible delivery of services, good integration and automation as well. And based on new functionality, API can exchange information easily. And what are the flaws of API are quite costly, and the security issues are the major problem in a common API. Thank you.